All right, let's talk about what we were just speaking with Nancy Cordes about. Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelenskyy says President Trump is living in a Russian disinformation space. Those are his words. It comes on the heels of yesterday's meeting between the United States and Russian officials, which Ukraine was not invited to. And it follows the commander-in-chief seemingly blaming Ukraine for starting the war. I want to play that soundbite.
But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal.
Been there for 3 years. It's their country. Their country was... President Zelensky's remarks came shortly before he was set to meet with the U.S. Special Envoy this morning in Kyiv. He claims Ukraine has evidence Russia is feeding the White House misinformation. So I want to bring in Nina Khrushcheva. She's a professor in the Julien J. Studley Graduate Program of International Affairs at the New School. And if her name sounds familiar, she is, in fact, the great-granddaughter of former Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor.
Thank you.
So what was your initial reaction to the comments from President Trump that it's Ukraine's fault for the war in Ukraine, that they've been there for 3 years? It is, of course, they've been there. It's their country. What did you think when you heard those comments?
Well, Trump is throwing words out and kind of looks at where they land somehow. He's not a particular craftsman in narratives. I mean, he has grand narratives, but they're not refined, because quickly after that, he said, well, they should have made a deal. And I think that's what he was referring to, that in the 3 years of war, Ukraine had opportunities to make a deal and now would have to make a deal because there is no way out for Ukraine. I think that's what he meant, but it certainly sounded very Trumpian. It sounded very dramatic. And we also know Zelenskyy is not his favorite person, and he's much rather talking to Putin. And so I guess that came through. Not I guess, it did come through in that interview.
What is your reaction, or what is your thinking on how they are feeling at the Kremlin? In other words, this invasion happened. It was condemned by our European allies. It was condemned by the United States. Sanctions were put into place against Russia, and now the United States is considering removing those sanctions, and in fact, as you've heard from the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State and the President of the United States, suggesting that Ukraine's, the gains that the Russians have made in Ukraine may ultimately not go back. In other words, they may keep those gains. Ukraine's borders may look very different after whatever is agreed upon is implemented. How do you think that they're feeling in Russia about the fact that they were able to do this and not suffer any consequences, at least going forward with this new president?
Well, I mean, the Kremlin feels like it's, it waited enough. It withstood all the sanctions and everything that is being thrown at Russia, Putin feels. And now he finally waited out. I mean, let's remember, this man is used to be KGB operative. He knows how to kind of wait out all other storms in the universe. And he feels totally vindicated in this, that his expectations finally came through, that the West is not unified, that the West is going to get tired of all these things that it threw at Russia, and it's happening. So it does seem that at least for now, Putin feels that he's very close to his goal of as the war began in 2024, February, now coming on the 3-year anniversary, very soon, February 22, that the Ukraine is going to be denazified, Ukraine is going to be demilitarized, Ukraine is going to be defeated. Even if it's not defeated as a nation, as a country, it's going to certainly lose territories. And that's what Putin felt he got. In fact, we just witnessed a meeting between the Russians and the Americans in El Riyadh, which both sides say went incredibly well. The diplomatic relationship is going to be restored. So for now, Putin seems like he is a winner. We'll see what happens, because Trump is quite an unpredictable man. He can change his mind. But for now, it does seem that Trump is repeating Putin's wildest dreams.
Yeah, you're right. The president can be unpredictable, but as you suggested, the fact that a former KGB officer is the president of Russia right now gives me a sense that a part of being a covert KGB operative is that you anticipate the unpredictability of your opponent. So the question then becomes, what does the New World Order look like if this rapprochement between Russia and the United States continues as it is continuing? As you know, obviously, going back to the end of World War II, up until that brief period of glasnost, and continuing with Vladimir Putin, the United States and Russia have been at odd ends, first with the Cold War and now with the rise of Putin. But I wonder if we are seeing the breakdown of the old social world order. And you now have potentially the United States and Russia and other former Soviet countries like Hungary or Belarus who are aligned together, and the rest of Europe aligned against the U.S. and the Russians, even if they don't have the economic or military might to actually withstand anything that might be decided by these two superpowers. Could we potentially see that down the line?
Well, it's amazing because you mentioned glasnost, and Mikhail Gorbachev, the one who instigated glasnost in the late 1980s, he used to say that in your question there is an answer. You actually answered the question. I mean, yes, I don't think we've ever seen anything like that. Basically, what we're seeing today is that Putin and Trump and Xi Jinping and Recep Erdogan of Turkey and others, and Orban of Hungary, they're sort of in one camp, and Europe and Vladimir Zelenskyy and Japan and South Korea are in another camp. I mean, we don't know exactly where Japan and South Korea stand at this moment, but I would assume that they are those Western allies that now seem to be left by Trump behind. I don't think we've ever seen that kind of configuration. Only in the 19th century, during the times of great wars, when France would be against Germany and Russia would be on one side or another. But in the 21st century, in modern world, we don't know what that new world order will be like, unless Trump is convinced that the West should be the West and the rest actually should be somehow democratically instructed. But what is democracy? You had a piece on Elon Musk, who talks about all this bureaucracy that nobody ever elected. I'm sorry. And Elon Musk was greatly elected as a bureaucrat or breaking bureaucracy. So I don't think we can predict that world order that is going to come. But we certainly see that the World War II architecture, that not even Trump, but actually Putin was the first one to start destroying in 2008 when the Russian troops went into Georgia, the former Soviet Republic, that it does seem to be another cycle of that destruction. And the third and the fourth and the fifth is yet to come. We have 4 years of Trump, so we'll see what happens next.
Yeah, Professor, this has been a fascinating discussion. We didn't even get into how China figures into all of this. I saw somebody posit that perhaps this is Trump's early attempt at sort of breaking the Russia-China coalition and seeing the writing on the wall and saying if there's a way to bring the United States closer to Russia, which then moves them away from China, that could be kind of thinking a geopolitical strategy that he's employing here. But I want to have you back as we continue watching what happens between the Ukrainians and the Russians, because there's a lot to continue to dig into. So thank you very much for spending some time with us.